If we think about regenerative approaches, the fundamental starting point for anything to do with regenerative farming is soil health. Soil is the starting point from which everything else will flow. And a key focus for a lot of the practices that are being discussed today are to help to build that soil health. So if we think about that diversity of planting material and those root depths, that's helping to improve that soil depth and that microbial activity. The real focus with this transition to a regenerative approach is the ability of these practices to regenerate our soil, and the soil being the center point for everything else that will flow through it. And that providing the healthy soil, providing the healthy plants, which provide the healthy cows, which provide the healthy people. So compaction is our #1 structural issue that we'll find on dairy farms. And it's not just for dairy farms, it's on the majority of farms, especially where we're dealing with livestock, we're dealing with challenging weather conditions and needing to be able to have our stock out and grazing and tractor movements and all those sort of things. In terms of how we remediate compaction, again, that first step is to understand where that compaction is and the severity of it. Our plant roots will be able to help in terms of busting through some of that compaction, but it may well be that we have to utilize some of those mechanical options. But again, going back to understanding where that compaction is and identifying the correct depth, and then applying or using that machine where the conditions are right in terms of soil conditions, moisture and climatic conditions to be able to remediate that problem. Dealing with those structural issues is the first point before we start to move to some of these transitions to these new practices, because it will really give you the best opportunity to get the benefits from those things if we can get everything started in a really good structural condition. So we can use cultivation equipment. It's about understanding why we're using it, whether it's addressing the issue that we've identified, and then thinking about some of those more medium or long-term strategies to put those plants in that will stop us having to use them in the future. So there are a variety of tests that farmers can do to see whether they've got good or bad soil. The starting point is always going out with your spade and having a look, because what that allows you to do is start to look at how your soil is structured. If we then move into some of the more analytical tests that you have to send off for the lab, you can do that to test your organic matter, your organic carbon, and to look at your chemical balances. And those are really useful indicators in terms of piecing together the different jigsaw pieces to see how you can start to build soil health. If we're looking at from a structural perspective, as I say, breaking your soil apart physically, looking at it is a really good starting point. But if we then want to understand the capacity of that soil to be able to sequester carbon and link into those sort of wider societal benefits, then analysis is really your best bet. And when we're looking at analysis, it's then about being consistent. So making sure you're being consistency in your approach in terms of taking the samples and then where you're sending them for analysis. So we've been really fortunate at all of the farms we've been to that we've had a mini digger in. So we've really been able to expose a lot deeper than when we would normally dig a pit. And what this allows us to do is really start to be able to appreciate the importance of depth. We can see here that this field has got a high amount of organic matter that we're seeing up at the top depth here, and starting to then transition down into these deeper soil levels, which have a real crucial part to play in terms of the ability to start to increase that rooting depth, bring that microbial activity down and start to get some carbon stored at depth. But it also allows us to understand how the roots are moving down, whether we're able to actually see those roots penetrating through our soil and actually accessing all of these deeper layers. So we can see here that we've got our plant roots actually penetrating down through our soil profile. We can see that we've got roots further down here, which is showing that the soil is nicely structured. What we can also start to see is that we can see that these bits of soil are glued onto our soil roots. So we can start to look like these sort of hairy roots here. And that's showing us that we have a good biological population in our soil. And we can see that those roots aren't having to go sideways because they're hitting areas of compaction. They're able to percolate all the way down through our soil profile. And the idea of some of these more diverse species like we've got in this field with a diversity of rooting depths is that we can start to pull that carbon and that microbial activity further down our soil and be able to really utilize the whole full depth of our soil profile. So what we're looking at here is we're looking at how our soil breaks apart. So how easily it is. We can start to see here that we've got a few areas of rust, which may indicate that over the winter we've had a little bit of waterlogging. Now that waterlogging might be as a result of structural issues, but it might also be as a result of actually the amount of water that we had. But it's a really good indicator that you can look at in terms of looking at how your soil is structured. What we're also seeing here is a nice spread out of our plant roots throughout our soil. We've got some good earthworm burrows here, and we can start to see that we've not just got an adult earthworm here, but we've also got some juvenile earthworms, showing that there's that really good biological community, because these earthworms are providing a really good function in terms of helping to sieve our soil, helping to make those nutrients more available, and also providing that architecture and that structure that allows our plant roots to be able to go down deeper and do what they need to do. So if we're thinking about improving soil health, the consideration to start to implement one of these more min-till or no-till approaches is a really good starting point, because what those approaches do is they reduce the amount of carbon that's being lost through that soil disturbance. If we compare that to our conventional ploughing approach, that turning over of our soil, that sudden flush of oxygen will release a load of carbon. And what we're trying to do, especially within these regenerative practices, is keep the carbon that we've already got within our soils and then look for the opportunities to pull more of that carbon in. So over the more medium term, thinking and starting to consider how we move away from those ploughing systems over to some of these more lower disturbance systems is a really key management practice. But it's very much about making sure that we're creating the best environment to be able to utilize these practices. So making sure our soils are well structured, because then we can start to use some of these new and innovative approaches. So my 3 top messages for farmers. Number 1, soil health is the starting point for a resilient and regenerative farming system. So understand your soil health. Become more intimately acquainted with your soil. Number 2, grab yourself a spade and go and dig. Because what that allows you to do is start to understand how your soil is structured, what your risk factors are, and allow you to start to piece together how you're going to create a system which is in better structural health, which is building organic matter, which is growing more grass, and which is better quality for your cows. And my 3rd thing to think about is really just to think about how soil health allows you to really start to create this resilience, looking at your soil as a sponge. Your soil is that catalyst that allows you to start to hold more water and to cycle more nutrients. So create the conditions that your plant roots, which are doing the magic, can really thrive and do what they need to do to create that resilience.